What's up, and welcome to another Monday edition of Locked On NBA. The biggest stories, the local experts. I'm your Monday host, Jackson Gatlin, also host of the Locked On Rockets podcast right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Today, we'll be talking to Josh Lloyd of Locked On Fantasy Basketball, as the NBA has had a huge surge in players being sidelined due to health and safety protocols, leading to multi-game postponements. We'll also speak with Doug Norrie of Locked On Nets to break down the Nets' decision to bring back Kyrie Irving as a part-time player. And lastly, we will be talking to Evan Dammarell of Locked On Cavs to discuss the Cavs' surprising season and how JB Bickerstaff has transformed this team from ping pong balls to playoff aspirations. But first, got to tell you about our friends over at Prize Picks. Today's episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. Check out prizepicks.com and use promo code NBA, or go to your app store and download the app today. Prize Picks is daily fantasy made easy. Joining us now is Evan Dammarell from Locked On Cavs. Evan, number 2 defense in the league, the 4th best point differential, 3rd in the Eastern Conference. The Cavs are a legitimate threat in the East this year. Tell me, how has JB Bickerstaff turned a team that is fresh out of the lottery with the number 3 overall pick into one of the top teams in the East this season?
I think a lot of it credit does have to go to JB Bickerstaff, because I always say the Cavs playing a bigger lineup is only weird when it doesn't work, but we're nearly 30 games into the season at this point, and he has stuck to his guns. Predominantly, it's been Lauri Markkanen at the 3, Evan Mobley at the 4, Jarrett Allen at the 5. If Markkanen was unavailable due to health and safety, it was Dean Wade, or with Evan Mobley being out now, it's Dean Wade starting in his place instead. So he's just kind of figured out some things that really work for this Cavs team. It's not just him, though. I think it's Darius Garland kind of ascending into being one of the best young guards in the league and kind of really putting together an all-star caliber season. I think it's Jarrett Allen being worth every penny of that $100 million extension that he signed. I think it's Kevin Love buying in to be a bench player. I think it's the Ricky Rubio acquisition, Ricky Rubio kind of being the common thread that unites all these players. I think it's Cedi Osman bouncing back from a bad season last year. And most of all, I think it's Evan Mobley just really being better than expected coming out of the gates, coming into this season. Like out of Summer League, we saw a lot of what the Cavs maybe saw in him at the 3rd overall pick. Maybe why he should have been maybe the number 2 pick. And if Cade Cunningham was in this draft, why he probably would have went 1st overall. But he looked raw. He looked a little unrefined. Granted, he was sharing the floor with Fiondu Kabengele at the time, so hard to really, and no true point guard. I mean, Isaac Okoro and Broderick Thomas were playing point for the Cavs in Summer League, so it's not really a lot you could glean from that, but it's the playmaking, it's the 3-point shooting, it's the defense, how advanced he is defensively. I think that the point differential and just how good the Cavs are defensively really speaks volumes on how mature Mobley is at 19 years old already. And I think the tandem of him and Allen just really work. And to circle back to your original question, JB Bickerstaff just has his finger on the pulse of this team. I think he has them fully bought in to playing his style of basketball and how he wants to on both ends of the floor. I asked him the other day, I said, league health and safety protocols are kind of just running their course on this league. How are you concerned? He's like, well, you can't plan for it, obviously, but he's like, I have full faith in my system and my players and my coaching staff to make sure that we go out and be successful on a night-to-night basis. And they then proceeded to beat the bricks off of Miami that night. And then they did the following that Wednesday when they played the Rockets as well, as you know all too well. I texted you my condolences at the time, but it speaks volumes to when this Cavs team is down Evan Mobley due to a hip injury at the time, now COVID, and they plug Dean Wade into the starting lineup, a guy who went undrafted out of Kansas State 2 or 3 years ago at this point, and they just keep on chugging along. Like they're a good team. I think the most fun thing is that no one expected them to be this good, so it's just a little bit of I'm enjoying it as it goes, and I'm just having a good time while covering them.
Yeah, talk about the expectations. I want to, first off, we're not going to talk about the Cavs Rockets beatdown. Not on this. You can go listen to my somber breakdown of that game, or your jubilant, excitement at a blowout on Locked On Cavaliers for that. But I find it so funny that this, the big ball lineup, whatever you want to call it, the trio of like 7-footers that they're rolling out. It's kind of like the inverse of the Houston Rockets from a couple of years ago in the COVID bubble. And that lineup, you mentioned it already, of Evan Mobley, Lauri Markkanen, and Jarrett Allen. I have a ridiculous 107.3 offensive rating, a 97.2 defensive rating, and well over 300 minutes played together. So when those guys play together, I mean, they're making it work. They're putting it together. I think that there's, a few different guys that you can point to on this team, but who to you, Evan, is the most important player for this Cavs team?
Oh, in general, it's probably Darius Garland because I don't think this Cavs team would be as successful offensively with that big trio because like I said, it's only weird when it doesn't work. And by all conventional means of basketball sense, this three big or the big ass lineup, as JB Bickerstaff calls it, just doesn't make any sense. Because when they acquired Larry Markin over the summer, I said, okay, that's weird because they have a lot of big guys on this roster. And then the Cavs announced that he was the starting three going forward. I'm like, okay, well, he's actually a 4 or 5. So JB doesn't really view the team as more of like set positions. He calls them bigs and smalls. So I think his philosophy, the game historically is won in the paint. And you're clearly getting that with three big guys on the floor, but you need somebody who can initiate the offense. And that's where Darius Garland comes into key. And like I said, his star is really rising this season. In terms of plus minus right now, he's like fourth in the league currently at plus 288 off the top of my head. So that means the Cavs have outscored teams by 288 points when he's on the floor this season, which is insane to think about considering he was like minus 237 last season. So it's a huge leap for him. I think it's the 3-point shooting. I think it's the playmaking. I just think him being comfortable and confident out there has really done a lot for them. But let's be frank, these are three big guys. They're not going to be able to create their own shots sometimes. I mean, yes, they can at times, but you can't expect them to do it reliably on every single possession. So you need a key point guard. I think Darius' star rising. Again, also Ricky Rubio as well being a key factor in this too. Those two are really like the key pieces for what makes this offense work. And if you watch a lot of Cavs film, you'll notice more often than not that one of those two are on the floor at any given moment with those big guys.
With Colin Sexton's season being ended, unfortunately quite early, has that kind of necessitated this almost expedited growth from Darius Garland now being kind of having to shoulder more of the offensive load in Sexton's absence?
A little bit. I think this trajectory was kind of on its own set path to begin with when the season started, where his rookie season, I talked about how you see flashes, the potential, and then those flashes kind of became big sparks. And then there's a couple games where he'd put it together and then he'd get hurt or he just looked kind of lackluster out there last season. But this year, Garland is finally just kind of putting it all together and really showing teams and fans why the Cavs took him fifth overall during the Zion Williamson draft. So I think this is just a set trajectory. I think, yes, the Sexton injury really threw a wrench in those plans. I think it just kind of, you ask him to shoulder the offensive load a lot more at that point. I asked JB Bickerstaff about this the other night where Drew Holiday is a good example of this when they played Milwaukee not too long ago, where he just kind of put the clamps on Garland and frustrated him throughout the night, and Cleveland's offense fell apart. And like that's a clear indicator that the Cavs need a player like Colin Sexton to kind of get easy buckets and be a tertiary shot creator as well. And I think that's where the Cavs are going to miss Colin the most. But yes, I think the injury has kind of expedited this growth, but I also just think this was on a set path where this was only inevitable we'd be having this conversation about him.
Another guy who kind of had the door opened for him by way of the Sexton injury, Isaac Okoro, who we're not going to talk about the dunk across three different Houston Rockets players the other night. Tune in for the sad tears on Locked On Rockets for that one. But how impactful has he been since being thrown into the starting lineup?
There was obviously an offensive dip because Colin Sexton was averaging, but other than his rookie season, a career low in terms of points per game this season, but he's still guaranteed 15 to 20, 25 points any given night. Like I said, he's an elite 3-level scorer. He can get you buckets. He's using his physicality and strength and agility to the line more often than not. Like it's really hard to replicate that. And I wouldn't wish that on any player, but I think my friend Mac Robinson asked a really good question, JB Bickerstaff, about this, saying like, what's the key difference? JB more or less said like offensively, you're not going to get the same production from Isaac, so you have to kind of do it by committee at this point, which they're making it work. I think Ricky Rubio coming back down to earth is going to make it a little tougher going forward, but Okoro's defensive chops are legitimate. The other night when they played your Rockets, I won't mention the dunk, but he did call himself an elite defender. You don't really hear that often from sophomore players, especially who says that like definitively with full confidence as well. And he's right. I think he is an elite defender. He has the ability to defend 1 through 3 with relative ease. He has the size and ability to defend fours if you ask him to. Maybe not fives, not so much yet, but it's been reported, and I've heard it myself, that maybe if Okoro kind of keeps this growth of his, where he's not as big a liability offensively as he was to start this season, especially when he joined the starting lineup, because he was dealing with hamstring injury recovery, which is it's tough for any player for sure to kind of deal with that. So a little bit of the burst wasn't there. I think his shot not falling and teams kind of disrespecting him by playing their centers on him was a huge thing. Um, I just think he will never be able to provide the offensive production Colin does, but the defensive ability more or less equates that. And I look at it this way: he's learning to play without the ball in his hands still, which is tough for a young player. But once he gets more comfortable doing that, it gives more opportunities for him off the ball, but also unlocks the offense further by giving more opportunities for Darius Garland to create offense for his teammates. So I think it's a mutually beneficial thing. Just like I said, the expectations were never like, oh, Isaac's going to come in and completely replace Colin offensively, because that's just a fool's errand to think that.
I had my doubts about this Cavaliers team, and not that I was,
You
proven
and me
wrong or
both,
anything. I was just
brother.
kind of waiting to see. I was just kind of waiting to see how things would play out. Evan, what does this Cavs team have to do to prove to everyone, to the rest of the NBA, that they are legitimate, or have they done it already? I mean, we're over a quarter of the way through the season, and they're third in the East.
I think they have proved it. I think if you ask a lot of opposing teams after they play Cleveland, they realize like, oh wow, these aren't the same Cavaliers that have been here since LeBron left for the second time. I think a lot of these players that have been here for a while, whether it was Sexton when he was available, or Garland, or even Jarrett Allen, and Isaac Okoro as well, like they hate losing. Like throughout their lives, they aren't used to losing because they've always been successful at every stop. So they really want to turn this around and kind of make this into a place. They embrace this underdog mentality. If you watch the Cavs play, you can see them barking at each other on the sidelines or when they're hyping each other up, because it's a weird Cleveland thing that they do, and it's like I said, it's only weird when it doesn't work, and right now it's working. But I think nationally, when you look at it, if whether it's Zach Lowe, who gets excited to talk about the Cavs on his segments, or you have like JJ Redick or Richard Jefferson on ESPN, when they say like, hey, they're asking to talk about the Cavs, or their ears perk up when they bring up the Cavs or something like that, I think organically people are starting to notice them on a national scale. I think if you look at it from a local side of things, I think everyone was down on them, whether it's Chris Fiore, the lead beat writer, or myself, or my co-host Chris Manning, or just the majority. Nobody really expected this from them. I think we ran a sports betting show prior to the season just with Ben Raxelrod at WKYC, and we said, in terms of betting the over or the under on teams, we said smash the under on the Cavs. They're going to be bad this year. And that was when they were projected to win somewhere around 26 games. The last I checked, they're on pace to win 52 games this season, which is incredible. And I think that's part of the fun. There were zero expectations coming in this season, and it's just been really enjoyable every step of the way. And hopefully, maybe the league flexes them, puts them on a couple national TV games, and realizes the error of their ways. But let's wait for them to get healthy first, and then maybe then that'll be their coming out party to say like, okay, the Cavs are maybe they're not back without LeBron, but they're certainly in a lot better of a place than they were 2 years, even a year ago.
Quite the turnaround for the Cavaliers indeed. Yet another team, unfortunately, dealing with the COVID-19 health and safety protocols, as we have hammered out thoroughly in segment 1 of today's show. But with that, Evan, you're going to have everybody covered for everything Cavaliers over at Locked On Cavs. Thanks for joining me on Locked On NBA.
Thanks for having me.